He once made all of Texas tremble. On a dead stretch of highway outside Laredo, a semi burned like a fallen star, black smoke clawing at the dawn. Inside, agents found 6 bodies, wrists zip-tied, throats cut with surgical precision. On each tongue, a tiny silver saint's medallion had been sewn with black thread. The reporters called him El Fantasma. The DEA called him a cartel executioner. The FBI whispered the word no one wanted on a cross-border case: serial killer. Special Agent Daniel Cruz stepped out of the Suburban, the desert wind slapping his suit jacket, the smell of diesel and cooked flesh in the air. Cameras flashed behind the tape. Mexican tabloids screamed headlines about a border butcher. Same pattern, the ME muttered. Same thread, same stitch. He's sending a message. Cruz stared at the medallions, glinting obscenely in the ruined mouths. St. Jude, patron of lost causes. Of course. This wasn't just cartel, Cruz said. This is ritual. This is personal. ICE had traced the truck to a fake shell company in San Antonio. DEA insisted it was just another turf war delivery gone wrong. But Cruz had seen these stitches before. Quietly, off the record, in case files buried so deep they had become urban legends. FBI lost him once, Cruz said under his breath, almost to himself. Not again. On the far side of the tape, a drone buzzed overhead. Somewhere in the crowd, a man in a baseball cap watched, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. When the wind shifted, he turned away, the faint clink of a silver rosary at his wrist. Ignacio Salgado. The world knew him only as El Fantasma, smiled to himself and melted back into the heat shimmer of the border road, already a ghost walking. Before he became a nightmare, Ignacio was just a boy with no last name anyone wanted to claim. He grew up in a clapboard house near the Rio Grande, walls thin enough to let screams pass through. His father ran loads for whichever cartel paid in cash. His mother sewed dresses and patched up knife wounds in the kitchen, the Singer machine rattling like a nervous heart. Watch, she told little Nacho, guiding his small fingers. Straight line, no shaking. If you shake, people bleed. The first time Ignacio saw a body, he was 8. His father dumped a young man on the kitchen table, chest opened by a shotgun blast. His mother's hands moved fast, stitching, stitching, stitching. Ignacio watched the needle flash in and out of ruined flesh, mesmerized by the way the wound closed, almost clean. Remember, his father said afterward, wiping blood off the boy's cheek with a thumb. Pain is information. Blood is just noise. Years later, when the house burned in a cartel purge, they said everyone inside died. A boy with no name disappeared in the flames. On paper, he stopped existing. But Ignacio didn't die. He crossed the river alone that night, water closing over his head, medallion of St. Jude cutting into his palm. On the American side, a border patrol light found him, shaking and half drowned. A young officer pulled him out, wrapped him in a blanket, promised things would be different. Paperwork gave him a new name, a new birthday, a new life in a foster home he never stayed in. Ignacio slipped away before dawn, medallion around his neck, his mother's sewing kit in his pocket. The next time his name appeared anywhere official was in an incident report, 12 years later, attached to photos of a body with a mouth sewn shut in a South Texas motel. The caseboard in the Joint Task Force room looked like a shrine to violence. Photos of bodies pinned beside maps of border towns, strings connecting crime scenes like veins. Laredo, McAllen, Brownsville. Across the river, Nuevo Laredo, Reynosa, Matamoros. ICE, DEA, FBI, and local cops all crammed around the table, fighting for jurisdiction with their eyes alone. This is cartel business, the DEA supervisor snapped. Message killings. You see the trucks, the routes? This is about product, not psychology. Cruz tapped a grainy photo at the edge of the board. 16 victims in 5 years, all with the same sutures, same silver medallion in the mouth. That's not just cartel. That's compulsion. An ICE officer tossed a file down. And these? He flipped through mugshots of low-level coyotes and sicarios, all rumored to have crossed paths with one man in Tamaulipas. Ex-cartel cleaner, no record, no prints. They call him El Fantasma because nobody knows what he looks like. A tech dimmed the lights and brought up a slide. Close-ups of the stitches. Perfect, tight, black thread looping through tongue and muscle. Those patterns, the tech said quietly, are identical down to the millimeter. Whoever did this is either medically trained or obsessive. Cruz felt a pressure behind his eyes, like a memory trying to surface. That same looping pattern. Shaky photocopies from an old, closed case he'd read as a rookie. A house fire on the border. A boy who vanished. Run the sutures through every forensic database, Cruz ordered. Not just US, Mexico too. Anything from old homicide files, ER reports, cartel torture dumps. If he's been doing this long enough, we'll find the ghost image. On a dusty street in Nuevo Laredo, Ignacio leaned over a man tied to a chair in a mechanic's shop, the hum of the industrial fan masking the victim's muffled screams. Don't move, Ignacio murmured, hands steady as he threaded the needle. Straight line, no shaking. If you shake, you bleed. St. Jude watched from the shelf as Ignacio stitched the man's tongue in careful silence, a craftsman perfecting his signature. The crime that made him legend wasn't supposed to exist on any report. It began in a secure DEA safe house on the outskirts of El Paso, a beige box between scrubland and freeway noise. Inside, 3 protected witnesses waited to testify against a major Gulf Cartel lieutenant. ICE had moved them in under cover of night. FBI had signed off on the security protocols. At 3:14 a.m., the cameras cut out for exactly 6 minutes. When they came back, the floor was red. Cruz walked through the scene hours later, boots sticking to dried blood. The witnesses sat upright on the sofa, eyes open, tongues sewn neatly to the lower lip, medallions shining like coins on the floor where they'd fallen. No defensive wounds, no forced entry. He got the code, one agent whispered. He walked in like he belonged here. The only mark of resistance was on the wall, a smear of red in the shape of a hand, sliding down as if someone had tried to stand and didn't make it. Cruz stared at the door keypad. Who knew the codes? 6 people, the supervisor said. 2 DEA, 1 ICE, 1 local liaison, 1 US Marshal, and you. Suspicion flickered in the room like static. Internal Affairs would have a field day. Cruz ignored the looks. He moved to the sofa, eyes scanning the stitches. There was something different. The thread tension, the angle. He was angry, Cruz murmured. This is sloppier than Laredo. They weren't targets, they were a message. Message to who? To us. Across the border, in an empty cantina lit by a single bulb, Ignacio sat alone at a table, hands trembling for the first time in years. He poured tequila over knuckles still tacky with blood. You're getting sloppy, cabron, the cartel boss across from him said. You broke safe house protocol. You drew too much heat, even for us. Ignacio looked up, eyes dead. Then don't call me again. He stood, chair scraping. As he left, the boss noticed the faint tremor in his right hand, like a man trying to thread a needle in the dark and finally missing. The breakthrough came from something stupid, something small. A junior analyst at headquarters, a kid with big headphones and bigger dark circles, fed every crime scene photo, every close-up of the stitches, into a new pattern matching algorithm, just to see what it could see. At 2:07 a.m., the system pinged. Hey, Agent Cruz, the kid said over the phone, voice jittery with too much coffee. You told me to look for old cases that matched El Fantasma's work? Yeah. I think I found his first ghost. An archived PDF appeared on Cruz's monitor. The scan so old it looked smoked. Border Patrol Incident Report, 1998. 1 dead man found near an abandoned crossing point, Mouth crudely sewn shut with black thread. Medallion jammed between teeth. No prints, no suspects. Case closed due to lack of evidence and cartel involvement suspected. But the sutures. The pattern was there, just clumsier, like a draft version. Where was this? Cruz asked. Near Laredo, a shack that burned down that same year. There's a note in the margin about a rescued kid, but his file sealed. Juvenile flood, some nonsense like that. Cruz's stomach dropped. That shack, that fire. He'd heard the story as a rookie from an old Border Patrol officer, half drunk and nostalgic. We pulled one kid out of that hell, the man had said. Little ghost. Never saw him again. Get me that kid's file, Cruz said. It's sealed, sir. Juvenile, maybe witness protection. Get me the damn file. When it arrived, redacted to hell, one thing wasn't blacked out. A sketch done by a social worker. A boy's hand approximating a necklace with a crooked little medal. Underneath, in neat adult handwriting, he says St. Jude keeps him alive. Next to it, in the margins, the boy's name before the system changed it. Ignacio Cruz stared at the page so long his eyes burned. The past he'd buried under a new badge and a new last name was clawing its way back. In Nuevo Laredo, Ignacio met with a mid-level cartel manager in an auto yard that smelled of oil and fear. Containers stacked like tombs, crows watching from power lines. You're famous now, the manager smirked. The Americans are saying your name. They don't know my name, Ignacio replied flatly. In truth, his name felt less and less real to him. El Fantasma fit better. A thing that passed through walls and systems and borders, leaving only stitches behind. You shouldn't have hit the safe house, the manager continued. Big bosses don't like that kind of spotlight. They say you're unstable. Maybe too proud of your art? Ignacio's jaw tightened. My art is the only reason your bosses are still alive. The manager laughed, then choked as Ignacio's hand closed around his throat, slamming him against the hood of a car. The pistol slid uselessly onto the concrete. Remember, Ignacio said softly, I know how to make you scream without moving your lips. Minutes later, Ignacio walked away alone, St. Jude medallion of the dead man clinking against his own. The crows scattered. Back in Laredo, Cruz sat in his dark office, the sealed juvenile file open beside a photo of Ignacio's latest crime. The resemblance between the boy's sketch and the adult signature was undeniable, and there in the juvenile file, barely visible through the black marker, was another name, a contact listed once, then removed. Officer Daniel S. Salgado, Border Patrol. His own name, his old name, ghosting through the redactions. The kid he'd pulled from the river. The one he'd pushed into a system and never checked on again. The one who vanished. His partner knocked on the door. You okay, Cruz? You look like you've seen a ghost. He closed the file, voice steady. Maybe I did. The joint task force started to crack. Too many agencies, too many egos, and now a leak. Every time they moved on a suspected Fantasma safe house, it was already clean. Every informant who whispered his name ended up with their mouth sewn shut in a drainage ditch. There's someone feeding him our moves, the ice chief growled. Someone in this room. Fingers pointed at DEA. DEA pointed at locals. Locals pointed at FBI. Only the cartel loved chaos more than bureaucracy. Cruz requested a quiet audit of access logs. Who opened what file, when? Who pulled the safe house codes? Who accessed the sealed juvenile record that linked Ignacio to that long-ago fire? The result punched him in the gut. Someone had accessed that sealed record before he did. Months earlier. From a login belonging to a retired Border Patrol consultant brought in to advise on the task force. Name? Salgado Javier. His father. Cruz tracked the old man down in a faded house near the river, the same stretch of dirt where so many ghosts crossed. Javier opened the door slowly. Oxygen tube looped around his ears, eyes yellowed but sharp. "You shouldn't be here, Daniel," he rasped. "This investigation isn't clean." "You accessed a sealed file," Cruz said. "A boy from 98, house fire, sewing, St. Jude. You remember him?" His father's hands shook. "I remember pulling a boy from a burning house while his brother ran," Javier said. "I remember you standing there, watching the flames, saying we couldn't go back in." Cruz's heart stopped. "What did you say?" "You said his name," Javier whispered. "You screamed it. Ignacio." The room tilted. The past rewrote itself in front of him. Two boys, not one. One saved, one lost. And now, maybe, one hunting the other without knowing. "Tell me where he went after the river," Cruz demanded. Javier coughed, eyes watering. "I did what protocol said. I handed him to the system. I thought we saved him." In the alley outside, a shadow moved. Ignacio lowered the pistol he'd been pointing at the window, hearing his name echo from inside, from voices he didn't think existed anymore. Shook him more than any bullet could. The task force launched Operation Needlepoint at dusk. DEA helicopters chop-chopped overhead. ICE units sealed known crossing points. FBI agents rolled in with armored SUVs. On maps, it was a neat circle around the cartel-controlled warehouse district near the bridge. In reality, it was chaos and radio static. Cruz rode in the lead vehicle, body armor tight against his chest. St. Jude medallion, his own, long hidden, cold in his pocket. The plan had been simple. Follow the leak back to its source. Let Ignacio believe he had one last safe route across the river. Then close the trap. But plans bleed, especially on the border. Gunfire erupted before they hit the first checkpoint. Cartel trucks burst from side streets, machine guns barking. DEA shouted for air support. ICE tried to coordinate with Mexican Marines across the river. Local cops just tried not to die. In the confusion, a single black pickup slipped away, heading for an old, disused crossing road that only someone who had grown up here would know. Cruz saw it on the drone feed. "That's him! That's Fantasma!" "Too hot," Command barked. "Stand down, Cruz. We hold the perimeter." He killed the radio, turned the wheel, and peeled off alone. The crossing road was dust and memories. The river glimmered ahead, black and slow. The pickup stopped by an abandoned shack, charred wood still clinging to its foundations after all these years. Ignacio stepped out, silhouette sharp against the dying light. For the first time, Cruz saw his face clearly, weathered, scarred, eyes that looked like his own reflected in dirty glass. "Federal agent!" Cruz shouted, weapon raised. "Hands where I can see them!" Ignacio laughed once, low. "You sound like him," he said. "Like the officer who pulled me from the water and pushed me into hell." Wind whipped ash from the shack into the air, like the night it burned. Two boys on opposite sides of the same fire, finally seeing each other through the smoke. They stood 10 yards apart, guns drawn, the river whispering behind them. Sirens wailed in the distance, but here it was just wind, water, and 27 years of unfinished business. "You're Ignacio," Cruz said. "From the shack, from the fire." Ignacio's jaw clenched. "And you're the one who didn't come back," he spat. "The boy they chose to save." Memories slammed into Cruz. The heat, the screams, his father's arms dragging him away, the second voice begging from inside the flames. He'd been too scared to move, too scared to go back. He had buried that guilt under a badge and a new name. "You think the system made me a monster?" Ignacio continued, eyes burning. "No, you did. You left me with them, with the same men who killed our mother." "Our?" Cruz repeated. "Don't pretend you didn't know," Ignacio said. "We have the same eyes, the same hands." The revelation clicked into place with sickening clarity. Brothers. One turned hunter, one turned butcher, both shaped by the same fire. Sirens grew louder, the window to end this closed by the second. "You can't cross tonight," Cruz said, voice steady. "We have every approach covered, every run. They'll kill you, Nacho. The cartel or us. Doesn't matter." Ignacio's hand tightened on the pistol. "I'm not going back in a cage." Cruz lowered his weapon an inch, just enough. "You want to disappear again? Fine. Drop the gun, come with me, and I'll make sure they see you as a witness, not a trophy. Otherwise, this ends with St. Jude at your feet." Ignacio shifted, thumb brushing the safety. And then it happened, the smallest thing. From Cruz's pocket, in the movement of his arm, a cheap, cracked St. Jude medallion slipped free and clinked onto the asphalt between them. The same design, the same worn face. Ignacio froze. "Where did you get that?" "Our mother's," Cruz said softly. "She split the necklace in two, gave us each a half." Ignacio's eyes flicked to his own medallion, then back. For the first time, his hands shook like a child threading a needle. In that tiny hesitation, a red dot bloomed on his chest. A sniper somewhere on the ridge took the shot command had ordered minutes ago. Cruz didn't see where it came from. He only saw his brother jerk backward, silver flashing as the medallion snapped free and skittered across the ground. The reports called it a justified shooting. Unknown cartel assassin, believed to be El Fantasma, neutralized while attempting to cross into Mexico. DEA took the press conference, ICE took the credit, FBI closed the file. The tabloids in Mexico ran a different story. They published grainy photos of Ignacio's body, St. Jude medallion broken beside him, mouth for once left unsewn. "The ghost of Texas Falls," the headlines screamed. In the evidence locker, two halves of a medallion were bagged and tagged separately. Just more case numbers in a warehouse of tragedies. No one wrote down that they matched perfectly when held together. Cruz knew. He visited the locker alone, late, the fluorescent lights buzzing like flies. He held the plastic bags up to each other, the halves aligning along the fracture line. One boy saved by protocol, one abandoned by fire and paper. He thought about the investigation, the leak, the sealed files, his father's guilty eyes. The retired officer who had accessed Ignacio's juvenile record months earlier, trying to warn someone, trying to track the boy he'd failed. Javier had died of a stroke 2 days after that last conversation, his statement never taken. Past mistakes, buried and redacted, had crawled back through every database and border checkpoint until two brothers stood facing each other in the ruins of a childhood home. On the riverbank where it ended, the wind still carries the smell of ash on some nights. Locals said you could hear sewing machines in the dark, a needle going in and out, closing the mouths of old ghosts. Cruz walked away from the task force, badge heavy in his pocket, knowing that every case he took on had been shaped by a moment when he'd been too afraid to go back into a burning house. Because in the end, it wasn't the FBI or DEA or ICE that brought down the most feared serial killer on the border. It was the smallest thing, a cracked medallion from a shared past, and in the end, it was his own past that betrayed him.